I keep wanting Pesci. That's a good last name. I love that last name. Thank you for coming on Lox of Laughs.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to
Thank
be here.
you so much. For those of you listening, there was a lot of back and forth, um, just scheduling wise. So I'm really glad that this worked out. Before we jump into it, Mike, what are you noshing on
Currently, like,
currently?
I would say I mean, yesterday I just did a bunch of really great barbecue. I'm a big barbecue
Like
nerd.
you barbecued yourself? Like you
Well, I
did
actually
it?
had my buddy do barbecue, but I do barbecue myself. Yeah, I do a lot of barbecuing.
No way. That's
Yeah.
so cool. Where are you?
So I'm out in East LA. So I'm in
East
Los Angeles.
LA. Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Amazing. And you barbecue. We don't, LA doesn't have a lot of great barbecue spots, I feel like.
No, I mean the only spot that I really, because I've tried them all, the only spot I
You
really like
have.
is my buddy. There's a spot called Overall Barbecue, and my buddy over there does a great job actually. And
Oh, okay.
he's like one of those like barbecue trucks, so like he does all the hard work the night before, and then he
Very
drives around
cool.
and goes to like breweries and stuff. He's great. He's really
Oh my
fantastic.
God. I love that. I love when breweries have food trucks. That's my favorite
Hmm.
thing because I get to try so many different companies and stuff.
Yeah, man.
Um, Brilliant. Wait, have you ever been to Texas for barbecue? Because I feel like
Yeah,
they
like
have good
down
barbecue.
like what part of Texas?
I know Dallas and Austin have a lot of the same restaurants. There's one I'm thinking of, and I forget the name. It's their big, big, big one. I've eaten at the one in Austin and Dallas, and it's amazing. Oh God, the name is going to kill me. What is it?
Is it Franklin's? Is it?
No. Mm-mm.
I'm trying to think of the other one. Like when I was down there, I went to, because when I went there, Franklin's is the famous one, and that one had a fire. So the year that I was there, they had a fire, so it wasn't open. And I went to this place. I think it was like Acorn or something, and it was actually pretty good. There's a guy down there that does Ethiopian barbecue now that is pretty crazy. Like
Have
he
you
does
been
like
to Little Ethiopia, like in the Fairfax area in
I've
LA?
I haven't gone to eat yet, but it's on
Okay.
my list. It's actually on my list. But I drive through there all the time, and every time I go
Yeah.
through, I'm like, "Oh shit, we have to come here and get some food." Is
I
basically.
know every single time, every time I drive through it too. Okay. So I have to tell you cuz I
Hmm.
just want to jump right into it because I've followed you for quite some time on Instagram. So having you on the podcast is really excited. I is really exciting for me. I just watched your short film Come Home.
Thanks.
Mazel tov, it's amazing.
Thank you.
The cinematography is exquisite. And the use of color is that is that something that you and this and I am I forgive me if this is a ridiculous question, but is that something that you think about when writing the specific use of color? Because I feel like there were it was I I almost felt like I was in outer space, but I wasn't. And I watched the film, and I'm not an idiot to think that it took place in outer space. But it was so the colors were so magnanimous. Is that something that you think about when writing?
Sometimes I think it depends on it depends on the project. It definitely comes into play. I feel like writing happens in two different stages. Like you write a script, you have a story. I
Mm-hmm.
work with screenwriters, and you have a
Me
story
too.
that makes it worth doing everything. And then my job as a director is that I then come in and figure out what world this is, like what I want the audience to see, what the perspective of it's going to be. And so in that stage, I'm always designing all of that. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I started as a cinematographer, so I have a lot of that craft that comes into my work.
There it is.
And so I use color, I use camera angles, I use lens choices, I use camera movement, blocking choices, all to support what the character's going through and what the character's feeling and how, uh, what I want the audience to subconsciously feel. And the thing that's crazy about color is that you subconsciously feel different emotions based upon the color that you're looking at. So
Mm-hmm.
all that definitely comes into play when we design something like this.
It was the film itself. It's so interesting that you come from the cinematographer background
Hmm.
because that was the first thing I noticed. It was just right off the bat. I mean, how long is it? It's an 11-minute.
Hmm.
or just about 11, just
Yeah, it's
over
about 11
11.
minutes. Yeah, it's a short, which is great. Yeah.
But what I found very interesting is that I have some friends that are writers, TV writers. So of course that's different, and cartoon TV writers, very different.
Yeah.
Now this, there's not much dialogue. I mean, the man is semi alone. I'm not going to give a lot away, but how do you write a script that's not just an outline that doesn't have a lot of back and forth dialogue, or what we as an audience really consider dialogue?
Well, I mean, it just see this sort of approaches my thoughts on cinema right now in general. I think that movies to me are visual medium.
Mm,
Like if it's not going to be done visually, then write a book, make a radio play, do a stage play, do something else. So
mm-hmm.
when I write something, even though there isn't a lot of dialogue, there's still a lot of descriptions involved. Sometimes there's dialogue that's written that gets scrapped when we're doing it, but it's just to put the actor in the right headspace.
Mm-hmm.
Really, to me, a script is just, I don't want to say the most stereotypical thing, but the script is just a blueprint for me. It's not
Okay.
the end all be all. Like, I'm
Right.
not Sorkin. It isn't my word is God. It's none of that matters. So for me, it's just I have an idea, I have something that I'm obsessed with, or if someone else wrote a script, like my buddy Will Simmons writes a lot of my feature scripts,
Mm-hmm.
if someone else writes a script, then I start there. But then I generally go through a script and I'm crossing things out. So it's like all
Right.
the descriptions get taken out, a lot of the dialogue gets taken out because I want an actor to come in and bring something new, bring their experiences into it as well. So there is a script that's written for something like this, but uh, there isn't a lot of dialogue. It doesn't need to
Right.
be dialogue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was very thought provoking without the dialogue. But I will say, I was expecting a lot more gore. Just given what I see you post, and I love. By the way, I love your posts. I also love participating in your contests. One
Oh,
day I'm
great.
going to win. I thought I was going to win not the last one, the one before.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember which one it was, but I've participated in a few, and I thought I was going to win. I didn't.
We just did a contest today too. We just put one out today. It was
Oh
one.
wait, I didn't even see today's yet. I haven't
Yeah,
seen
one of our
today's yet.
sponsors is giving us free gear, so we're giving
Oh,
out gear to
mazel.
people.
I
Yeah,
love
I
free
mean
stuff.
that's kind of the whole thing. I mean, the my Instagram and my podcast are just about the community of movie fans. It isn't
Mm,
even like a you don't come here to learn filmmaking. Like it's a community. It's a
mm-hmm.
spot where all of us starving artists can come together
Can,
and
yeah.
enjoy cinema, enjoy horror movies, and craft. And so I like to try to give out as much free stuff as possible because I know how hard it is for people to make money these days.
Yeah, it's rough out there. But that's incredible of you. Have you always been more of a horror movie buff, or is that just where your quote unquote talents lie?
I mean, horror I've always loved. I mean, I've loved horror, I've loved action, I've loved adventure. I love cinema. And
Mm,
I think what I like about horror is that horror is one of the few genres where the audience is in on it. The audience is in on the craft. So
mm,
they really like it when you swing for the fences. You do
mm,
something insane with camera movements. You do something really fun and exciting and different with, sound or effects.
mm.
And it's like this. It's like going to a concert when you go see a horror movie. It's there's this
It is.
exchange, you know.
I agree with that. I also think there's many different like levels of genre within horror as well. I mean, there's the jump scare kind of movies like Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. Those are slasher flicks. But there's The
Mm-hmm.
Exorcist, which is not so much. There are jump scares, of course, but it's very psychological. Or there's
Yep.
something like Rosemary's Baby, which, by the way, I don't know if this was on purpose, but when I was watching your film today, I thought that a lot of the color reminded me of Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Oh, so it
that's cool.
wasn't okay. So that was all
No,
me.
I mean, there's a lot of like hodgepodge references.
Sure.
we live in a time period where everybody's just watching stuff all the time, and so like
Mm,
you there's this zeitgeist of all of this stuff that's sort of floating around. So a lot of connections can be made. I think, the references that I use, they're going to be very strange. The references I use for this, I'm obsessed with Tony Scott. So Tony Scott was a director from the 80s and the 90s. He did a lot of action movies. He's Ridley Scott's brother. He
mm,
died a few years ago. But he did movies like Top Gun. He did movies like
okay.
all of like the action movies for that time period. So a lot of the language of my cinema has a very sort of Tony Scott language that, at least with this
Okay.
movie, with Come Home in it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's very subverted. You wouldn't know until I told you that that's what it was.
Well, I think the entire film is very it's interesting because it's both quiet and not quiet because I kept wanting to know. I'm not giving anything away, but I kept wanting to know what the knocking was, and I kept thinking it has to be something internal. This is an internal struggle. It has to be. It has to be. I'm not giving anything away, but I do think everyone, if you haven't watched it already, you should because it's very good. But it's I mean, I want to say it was very emotional too. And
Yeah.
I didn't go into it thinking it would be. I went into it thinking this is going to be very gory. It's a horror movie, and I was very pleasantly. I mean, I love horror though, but I was also very surprised. I don't normally like send my parents horror stuff because they're not
Hmm.
really into it. Not like me and my brother, but this one I'm like, you should watch this. This is incredibly moving.
That's
So.
good. That's good. That's good that you feel. I mean, the truth of it is that I didn't set out to make. I really didn't set out to make a horror movie. It
Mm.
was really Lance Williams. Lance A. Williams is the star of it, and him and I are friends, and we've been friends for a long time. And he's a fantastic actor.
He's
And
great.
yeah, and this movie came about honestly because of the depression that we were in after COVID, and
Mm-hmm.
then I was out trying to get movies made after straight after COVID, and we were so close, and we were promised that a movie was going to get made, and then they just walked away from it, and everything dropped out, and so I was incredibly depressed, and I was out of the business. I really was like, screw this. I don't know why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, I have my show, my podcast, and I sort of fell into the podcast for a while. And I ended up interviewing this woman, this coach, Judith Weston, and she writes these books. She wrote a book called Directing Actors. I have them right behind me. So Directing Actors, and then the Filmmaker's Intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I got her on the podcast after we read the books, and we talked a lot about it. And my eyes were opened because I had been directing for about 18 years or 19 years, and I didn't know any of this stuff. And as I went through it, I was like, man, I can't believe I called myself a director with all the stuff that I'm learning from this.
Right.
And it was how to communicate with actors and really how to build these characters the right way. And so Lance, I give him the credit. He said to me one day, he's like, why don't we just do an exercise? Why don't we just do something just
Mm-hmm.
to try out some of these skills? And I was like, okay, and I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of really in a dark place. And so we came up with this idea to do a scene, and we wrote this scene that happens in the garage. We just wrote this little sequence,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked with Lance, and we used a lot of the techniques that we had learned from this book, and it was how to develop characters together, how to make characters into something, um, and Lance, through that whole process, like the shaky hand was figured out through that process, like lots of things were figured out through that process.
That is so crazy that you brought up the shaky hand
Mhm.
because it's so. I don't want to use the word minimum. I mean, it's so like blink and you miss it, but you notice it. I noticed it instantly because it's right at the beginning, and I was like, oh, this is something's going on here.
Yeah.
There's something very deep happening here. And I got to the end and I was right. By the way, the ending credits,
Hmm.
I judge a lot of film based on their opening and ending credits.
Oh yeah, how come?
I don't know why. Now, I think it's because it stems back for my love of musicals, because I think musical numbers that open a show or film
Mm-hmm.
really have to be incredible, magnanimous, phenomenal in order for me to sit through the entirety of something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what it stems from. Because this is me going back to my childhood. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been in love with opening credits and
Mm.
ending credits. And a lot of the time, ending credits don't live up to their opening credit.
Oh, interesting. What's your favorite opening credit in the movie?
That's a great question. I love Grease
Okay.
because it doesn't open with the credits. It opens with the scene on the beach, which so many people forget. So
Mm-hmm.
many people forget that Sandy and Danny Zuko
Mm-hmm.
are on the beach at the very beginning of the movie, and Love is a Many Splendor thing is playing in the background, and they're kissing and they're running around. It's beautiful, whatever. And then is it Frankie Valley? Yeah, then Frankie Valley's Grease actually plays for the opening credits. And I love it. I love it. Great song. The fact that they have a cartoon, I don't know. And I've watched Grease ever since I was a child,
Uh-huh.
whether it was appropriate or not. I didn't
Uh-huh.
understand all of the jokes when I was a kid, but I've always loved that opening credit. Always.
That's cool, man. That's a
Do you
cool
have
one.
one? Do you have a favorite?
It's going to
I
be
know it's
complete.
on the spot, right?
Well, no, I mean it's going to be the complete contrast.
Oh,
I would
yeah.
say, I would say my favorite, and they're infamous. I think my favorite opening credits, the ones that sort of really triggered me, and honestly shaped the industry, were the opening credits for Seven. So the one with Brad Pitt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those credits were masterfully done, and then because of those credits, you have every opening credit sequence for every streaming show. They're all based on the credits for Seven, which I loved. And if when you see my film, you know how much I like close-ups and macro lenses and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of that was really influenced by the opening credits of that movie, I think. So
Okay, I have to. I haven't actually seen it.
you haven't seen
So
Seven?
no, I
Okay.
haven't, and
They
now I'm
just
going to.
they just remastered it, so they're going to be pushing it out. But if you haven't seen it, it's well. Do you like thrillers?
Love. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, Gwyneth Paltrow,
I love Morgan Freeman.
David Fincher directed it. So the guy who did Social Network, Gone
Mm-hmm.
Girl. This is his first big movie. And it was made in the 90s. And it is the movie that has influenced all gritty crime TV shows. So, like, if you like that
Okay.
stuff, you go back and you watch Seven. It's a it's a noir and it's great.
I'm
It's a great.
definitely going to watch it now after this, for sure.
Yeah, I
Okay, so
100% recommend it.
would you say that that's your favorite movie of all time, or just your favorite credited?
No, I think it's definitely like if I had to make a list, it would be in the top 20 movies. It would be up there.
Can you
But
give me your top three?
oof, that's hard. Like top
It's
three for
hard.
what? Like is it a genre? Like if it's
Let's do
genre?
horror. Let's do horror.
Well, uh, because I ask people that question all the time, and
Look at your
always
DMs. If you scroll back, I gave you to get a sneak preview of one of your last films.
12 km.
Not
Yeah.
not this one. Your one before, which I think was very hardcore gore.
Which one
Um,
did you ask for? 12 kilometers, the
that was
Russian one?
it. That was it. That was
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And I think the question was like, what are your top three horror movies?
Yeah. What was your list? I can't remember.
I know I gave you The Exorcist.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Um, and now this one goes back to what we were talking about genre wise when it comes to horror, because I think Scream is a
Hmm.
cinematic masterpiece from credit to credit.
I
No,
don't know if
I'm
I agree with a
no,
cinematic masterpiece.
I really love it. I think if you go into Scream knowing you're not this isn't a serious
Yeah.
emotional movie. You're going into it the with the idea that this is a campy slasher flick, and they take themselves so seriously, and that's what I love about it. These actors, it's as if they were they were in Hamlet. That's what I loved about it. It was so ridiculous, and I to this day I love Wes Craven. But so that was the other one I gave you, and I
Yeah.
cannot remember the third one that I can't remember. I don't know. Oh, I think the Invisible Man. I don't remember. I'd have to look at our DMs.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna hunt for it. So with Scream, I agree that Scream is a great movie. I mean, what makes it really great for me is that it is Wes Craven, and he's sort of spoofing himself, which is
Yep.
really great. I think that's really awesome. Um, hold on, I'm seeing if I can.
Are you looking for the DMs?
Yeah, I'm seeing if I can find it here. If you were asking me about mine,
Mm-hmm.
here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Hold on. Top three:
What'd I give you?
The Exorcist. The Invisible Man. Which Invisible Man was it? Was it the recent
Wow.
one?
The most recent one, and I only say that, not only, actually I say that because it depicts escaping and removing yourself from a psychological and abusive relationship so incredibly well. I
Mm-hmm.
think the fear that oh god, I'm forgetting the lead actress's name in
I
it.
can't remember her name either. Yeah.
She's on The Handmaid's Tale.
Yep.
The fear that she has, especially at the beginning when she's just walking outside to get her mail, is so realistic to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was petrified the entire time watching the movie. Not because, and like The Exorcist, I watched, Scream, I can watch before bed. But I was petrified watching this movie because it was so realistic. I actually turned it off twice to get up, take a lap, come back, sit down, and watch it because I was like, this is,
That's so interesting. See, that's what's different about modern viewing experiences, and that's what's very hard for me as a filmmaker is that you have the control, which is why I like to go to the theaters. When you go into a theater, you don't have any control. And so I will spend a lot of time making you feel that anxiety and the idea that you
yeah,
could stop that anxiety
I
and
know.
reset it, it's pretty hard. But um, yeah, for my top three, always at the top is The Thing. So John Carpenter's The
Uh
Thing is
huh.
always up there.
Okay. It's a good one.
And then Jaws is always up there. And then it floats. The third one floats. It depends on my mood. So sometimes it might be like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It might be
Okay.
The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is a great
Mm.
movie. It might be. I'm trying to think of another. Nightmare on Elm Street. The first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's a good
Um,
one.
yeah, Jacob's Ladder. Like there's so
Mm-hmm.
many great movies. So my third one's always rotating.
So I want to go to Jaws because I want to know if you know anything, since it's one of your favorite films. Do you know
Mhm.
anything about the murder conspiracy theory behind it?
No, what is this?
Wait, you haven't heard? Wait, now I want to bring up the article. I mean, there's
Yeah,
multiple,
no,
but
I don't know anything.
there was back in the when was the body found? Back in the 70s, a body of a murdered woman was found on the island where they shot Jaws. And there is an extra in one of the scenes that was wearing similar clothing to what this Jane Doe, this body, this female body was found wearing. And people have been trying
Uh,
to place it. They've been trying to so much so I'm going to try to pull it up. Jaws murder. I'm just typing in Jaws murder into Google. Okay, the story behind Jaws and Lady of the Dunes murder case. This is from 2018.
okay. Oh, I had heard about. Okay, because the island is Martha's Vineyard, and when I was a kid, I grew up on Cape
Yes.
Cod, which is right there.
You grew up on Cape
Yeah, I had heard
Cod.
about the woman in the dunes.
So,
Yeah.
do you believe that
So
it's that extra? Because that extra to this day, and no one from the family, as far as I know, has come forward saying, like, no, hey guys, like, this person is alive and well. It's not the body.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, they definitely get internet on Martha's
They did
Vineyard,
internet.
but Yeah. I
I
don't
mean,
know,
weird things
man.
can
I mean,
happen.
legends are legends. Yeah, it's
Well,
true. I mean, if someone was killed, it's terrible that they were killed, but it's also convenient that Jaws was also shot on the same island. I don't know. I don't know, but
yeah, there's a light at the end of every tunnel, I guess. I mean, weird things happen, especially maybe not so much with this type. This isn't like Jaws isn't a psychological thriller or like a mystical
it
horror
kind of
movie.
is though.
I guess, but what I'm saying is like Poltergeist, there are so many stories of behind the scenes like scary moments happening for the cast and the crew and even back home off of the set that like that one you're kind of like, yeah, I get it. Like you're making a movie about the afterlife, like it's kind of freaky.
Well, yeah, but what are you talking about? The original Poltergeist?
Original, yeah. I did see the remake that came out like 10 years ago, but yeah, the original
I
one
don't
and there were
remember.
two sequels to the original, right?
Yeah. So yes, the original one. The interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is that the original one was directed by Toby Hooper, who was the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and
What?
Spielberg was
Wow.
producing. Yeah, so Spielberg was producing Poltergeist, and Toby Hooper and him weren't really seeing eye to eye, and Spielberg was stepping in and taking a lot of stuff from him. So if you read interviews with Toby Hooper, he's like, yeah, it's kind of a nightmare to do that movie. And then when you watch that movie, it feels like a Spielberg movie because he
Hmm.
really was coming in and stepping over him and doing that kind of stuff. So at least that's all the legend
Oh my
after that.
god.
So as far as the movie being a nightmare, I'm sure a lot of it was a nightmare because there was a lot of stress around the production of that film.
I was talking about more of like the mysticism nightmare, but like that's actually really interesting. They had their own like Justin Baldoni,
Yeah.
Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds situation on
Yeah. Well, yeah.
within Poltergeist. You didn't
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
you didn't see the remake of Poltergeist?
So
No.
I
Okay.
saw it, but I can't remember. Sam, what's his name is in it?
Rockwell.
I
Yeah.
love him. Sam Rockwell. Yeah, he's in it.
He's in it.
He's great.
I saw it in theaters actually, so I didn't have to get up. When I was a
I
kid,
just don't remember.
I remember the remake being a lot more emotional than the original. Like they made the family uh, sh- uh, struggle fiscally, like they were not able to pay bills, and
Yeah.
that it sort of
Yeah.
it didn't bring me out. It was just something like I turned to my friend. I saw it with my friend Allie, and we both said to each other like, "That was unexpected. We didn't expect to have that just random addition to a
But I
remake."
also feel like it's less interesting. There's a reason why the first one's more interesting. It was more
Hmm.
creepy. I think there's a whole period of time where people try to cram too much drama stuff into horrors, where you're just like, no, no, no. The horror is that the house was built on an Indian burial ground, and
Right,
there
right.
are ghosts coming because of the Indian burial ground. Like it's not like we can't afford this house,
Right. Yeah,
and then there are ghosts coming. It's like no,
there's such a thing as too much backstory, like save it. We don't need it.
yeah. I think honestly, if I'm going to be real about it, I think that there are a lot of people in Hollywood that don't like horror movies that make horror movies because they want to make the cash on horror movies, but they don't
Mm.
physically like to make horror movies. So when you talk to them as a horror director, and I've pitched to these folks before where they're like, we want to make a horror movie, but we want it to be more cerebral. And you're just like, do you like horror movies though? Because it should just
Right.
be scary horror. Oh, we don't want the monster to like to be too creepy. What if it's like this guy instead? And I go, no, it's a real monster. Like that's what
Yeah.
scares people. Teeth and nails. And, like that's
Yeah.
So I think there are too many people in Hollywood that are making horror movies that don't like horror movies,
So then that
and so you're
actually
seeing a lot of like
that brings
sorry, go ahead.
me to a question that you just sort of talked about with oh, it should be a man versus a monster. What do you feel How do you feel about the Insidious movies, because that monster is in fact
Hmm.
played by a man in makeup, turning him into
Yeah,
a the red and black monster. So what are your thoughts on that?
yeah. I think it's cool. I mean, like the Insidious movies, that was all James Wan.
Mhm.
Um, and I know James Wan. He he was giving us feedback on one of our films. Um,
Amazing.
the I like the imagination that is in that, and I like sort of the cerebral stuff, but I feel like it was a very clever way of working within the budget.
I,
So,
I see that. I see that.
like you go into this dark world, and the dark world's just all haze and smoke, and there are no lights turned on. Very clever way to work with the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Having somebody in that makeup is a very clever way of working within the budget, I think. So I like those movies. I like what's his name, the dad. He's really great.
Oh, I love him.
Great cast.
I also Rose Byrne
Patrick.
is the husband, is the wife as well. I think she's very
Yeah,
talented and beautiful.
she's very talented. She's very good. So I mean, they're fun movies to me, and they feel like old Nightmare on Elm Street vibed movies.
They do
So
feel
I
like
enjoy
older
them.
films. I agree with you. I like the Insidious movies.
Yeah,
I like James Wan. I like his work.
yeah.
They,
I like
they
his Conjuring movies a lot.
I do. So here's my thing. I think this happens quite a lot in horror, but not so much in other genres. I think the sequel to the first Conjuring was both scarier
Hmm.
and told in a more thought-provoking and exciting way.
There's a
I
lot
still
more
liked
craft
the
in that
first
one.
one.
Yeah.
I want to make
Hmm.
that clear. But the second one, I was on the edge of my seat, saw it in theaters. I was upset when it ended, and I knew how it ended. Well, I mean, I knew how it ended based on what I knew of the actual story being told,
Story. Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
film.
I love the second one. He's definitely doing a lot more craft in that movie. He's definitely uh, playing a lot more as a director, and you feel it. So like even with the camera moves and all the really cool practical effects and the crosses turning upside down on the wall and like all that stuff that's happening, and it's just a fun. It's a fun horror movie, and I think my I mean, even though this new one I made is very emotional,
Mm,
I like to make movies that are fun to watch and fun to go on this ride, and it doesn't have to always be loaded with social text or like it's just like make it
yes.
fun and make it scary. And like the thing that we should celebrate when we go to see a movie like this is it scary,
Mm-hmm.
and do we like the voice of the director, do we
Mm.
like the voice of the filmmaker, because we're inundated with television right now, and the streaming services are what quote unquote they call the writer's medium, which in my mind it's just become plot delivery devices. So when you
Mm.
watch something on television, they're just hitting you with plot, 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 plot,
Yes.
plot, and actors are just standing in rooms and looking at each other and talk, 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 talk.
Mm.
And so when you get to go see a movie like if you got to go see, what was the, I keep forgetting the name of it, the new one with Demi Moore, really good. She just
The
won the
substance.
Golden Globe. Substance.
Substance.
So you get to go see a movie like The Substance. You get to go see a movie where there's a direct voice. You get to go see like Talk to Me. That's
Mm.
another great one that came out recently.
Mm-hmm.
Even Smile 2, I thought was really good. I thought they did a good job with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
haven't seen Smile 2 yet. What's interesting about that, I guess I assume they're turning it into a whole franchise now. Uh,
of course.
the first one, I was told this movie is terrifying. Don't watch it alone. I know you like to watch horror movies by yourself, Ashley. Don't do it. You're going to be scary. You're going to be scared. So I said, I accept that challenge. I shall watch it by myself.
Hmm.
I started watching it. I got about 45 minutes into it, turned it
Hmm.
off because I had to go somewhere, forgot to watch the end. So I have to restart it because that was like right when it was
Ultimate.
released on streaming, and so I have to rewatch it. But the trailer for the second one looks really great, so I'm
I think
excited.
it's better than the first. I think the first to me was sort of just a rip on It Follows. I think It Follows
Yes, thank
did a
you. And
better
It
job.
Follows was so great, great
Yeah, it was
storytelling in
better.
my opinion.
Yeah, it was better. It did a better job on it. But the second one does a really, he really sort of reinvents the vibe and the tone of it in a
Mm-hmm.
great way, and sort of going in with this pop star. It's great. So it's a good entrance into it, and it's definitely an improvement. I think it's better than the first film, 100%, one hundred
Have you
percent.
ever seen a horror movie that you were so excited to see and then were just grossly disappointed? And it just, not only was it not scary, but it wasn't psychologically thrilling. The ending was stupid. Or have you ever been just
All the time,
disappointed? All the time.
all the time. But more often than not now. I
Mm.
think there's a lot of stuff out that comes out now that is just clickbait fuel, and it's not necessarily good filmmaking and great horror stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so you end up tuning into it, and you're just let down. And my argument, whenever I'm trying to get a movie made, my argument that I have when I talk to financiers or if I talk to producers is the third act of the movie has to be awesome. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of this stems from A24. I like A24. I appreciate what they do, but
Mm-hmm.
A24's mission statement was trailer meat. So they always wanted to make trailer meat.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so the most exciting stuff in a movie is really the build, the first act, and then you have a couple of sequences, and that's where they spend their money. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third act of them just falls apart. You go watch movies like It Comes at Night. I was so excited about that movie, and then you watch the film, and spoiler alert, nothing comes at night, and you're just like, ah, why did I sit through this whole thing? So um, the problem is that to do a good third act, it costs
Mm-hmm.
money, and it's a money game. And
Yeah.
I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people get into horror because they think or they know that they can be real cheap and not spend a lot of money and make a big return. So the idea
Mm-hmm.
of doing like a paranormal activity or the idea of doing a $2 million movie and then making $350 million return on it
Right.
is the reason why a lot of these, I don't want to say scumbaggy, but a reason why a lot of these producers get into doing it. Um, and it's the audience. It's like being promised a great cheeseburger and showing up and there's only like one bun on it,
And it's
and like,
vegan.
yeah, exactly. And you're just like, you told me I was going to get a sweet smash burger, and this is,
Yeah.
Morningstar. Like, what am I doing here?
That was
You
funny.
know?
I'm pretty sure I just like spit. That was so funny. Spit take. Um, yeah, I also feel like a lot of, like, speaking of a film like Paranormal Activity, I remember seeing that in theaters. I was very
Hmm.
scared. And then it obviously did incredibly well, and therefore the budget kept increasing for the sequels. Now, that is a great thing, but it can also be detrimental because then you lack on the storytelling. A lot of the time, not always. Not clearly with
I
Smile
think it just
2 that
depends.
didn't happen. That they did a great job is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I mean, it just depends. I think it depends on the producers. I think
Definitely.
at the end of the day, it's like you're making a sequel because you want more cash, and as as a director, you make more cash. So
Mhm.
the problem is when you're a young director, if you're an independent filmmaker, you'll get brought on to make a movie, and if you're lucky, you're making the minimum. So like you'll get
Mhm.
pulled on to do a movie and maybe make $150,000 to do a movie. And
Mhm.
you sit there and you go, wow, that's a lot of money. You go, no, that's 2 years of your life. It's
Right.
2 years of your life of just sort of making this thing, and you can't do anything else. And so the idea of doing, look at the guy that made Squid Games. He made nothing. His deal was terrible.
Right.
So the idea of doing a sequel, should there be a Squid Game sequel? Probably not. But the idea of doing one means that he can now leverage, and his agents can now leverage the success that they have and go, okay, give me
Right.
3 million to do this movie. And
Right.
so I think that generally is the main motivation behind doing a sequel is to
Mhm.
make cash and to make more money. That's
It's
really it.
interesting that you refer to season 2 of Squid Games as a sequel,
Hmm.
and then not just like the second season. But is that because there's just so much time in between each season these days for every TV show? I
Well, I
mean,
mean,
Stranger
I
Things,
mean,
it's been 6.5 years since the last one, right?
yeah, but I mean, it's like you call it a sequel in the business because you're like, let's go back to that well and suck some more money out of it. Like,
Mm.
come on. And I don't think they ever had the intention of doing. I think I read an article where it was like, we're not going to do a sequel. This is just a standalone series, and then uh, Netflix comes along and says, "Hey, we'll give you this much money," and the poor filmmaker that made no money on the original deal
Mm,
made nothing
yeah.
out of a hugely successful series that was like bringing in how much money for that streaming service.
Yeah.
So it's a sequel to me. It's different if you've written a whole series of stuff and
Right.
it
Mhm.
feels like an arc,
Right.
and you go, all right, so this is a series of movies, or this is a series that runs with it. But you can tell the difference. Like when you're watching something, you go, all right, you guys are just digging back in. Got it, cash cow.
What do
Go,
you think
go.
of American Horror Story when it used to be on? I guess it's not on anymore. But what do you think of Ryan Murphy and
I never
his
really
genre of
watched it.
horror?
That
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I can see why you probably liked it because it's the
Yeah.
guy who did Glee,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So it's from
Musicals
Glee
and
to that.
horror always work so well together. I love
Yeah,
Ryan Murphy and I loved certain seasons of American Horror Story. My favorite season was season 1 because I love a good haunted house. Give me a good haunted house, I will accept.
that's cool.
I will.
I think I had one of the directors, I think, from Glee on our podcast. It was funny. I think it was Glee, and it was one of those shows, and I had him on, and I think I jokingly had him on. I can't remember if it was Glee or not, but
You
it was a
joke.
show
Yeah,
that
I
my
was going to
fiance.
say like was who was in on the joke? Like you had
Well, it was a show that my fiance was watching. She would watch all the time, and so I was like, "I'm going to get the director on." And so I got the director on. What was it? It was Gossip Girl. Yeah, it was Gossip Girl.
so that's
So
very
then,
different from
yeah,
Glee.
so
Very different.
I had so Glee, Gossip Girls, Gigi. I had
Okay.
him on just as a joke, and I said to him on the show, I go like, "I don't get it." He goes, "Mike, you're not the demographic."
I don't get it. You're I don't get it. That
I
is
don't get
so
it. He said,
funny. Can you
"You're
explain this to
you're
me?
not the demographic, kid." Yeah, he's like, "It's not for you." And I'm like, "Okay, got it.
That's how I
I
feel
get it now."
when people ask me like why I watch reality TV. I'm like, if you don't get it, I can't explain it to you, but I love watching salacious, ridiculous reality TV.
Well, I mean, I guess I could admit this. I've admitted it to the on my podcast. Um, I do have a weak spot. I do
For
have a weak spot for the Kardashians. I do watch the
oh,
Kardashians with my fiance.
that's
I
so
I think it's
funny.
I think it's more because I want to scream at somebody, and so like I'm just like, "What are you doing?" I think it's just that. It's just the judgmental, couch criticism
Yeah,
that I can throw at them. But yeah, I keep up with them all the time.
you're keeping up with the Kardashians. Good for you, Mike.
Yeah,
This was
yeah.
so fun. I feel like I got to it's rare that I get to just have a straightforward conversation about horror and like my love of like campy horror and slasher flicks. So I really appreciate this. Will you,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, will you tell everybody where they can watch all of your good stuff, where they can follow
Mhm.
you, and where they can listen to you?
So if you want to see Come Home, or if you want to see the other film 12 Kilometers, you have to follow me on Instagram at Mike Pecci and send me a DM. Send me a DM. Send me your three favorite horror movies. And if I agree with you, you'll get a link and you can see the movies. So that's the only way to see the films. And then if you want more of this crazy guy talking to you for hours and hours, I've got a podcast called In Love with the Process where I have other filmmakers on. Like I've had cinematographers, costume designers from like Shogun and from all these different TV shows on, and we talk about how stuff is made. And then we have a second podcast called Right Place, Right Time, which is co hosted by Lance, who is in Come Home. And we do a whole show uh, digging into the theory of do you need to be in the right place, right time for something to happen? And in order for you to be successful, do you have to be in the right place, right time? And so we
Hmm.
have people on the show from all walks of life, and they tell us their right place, right time stories, and we try to make sense of them. So
How
um,
interesting.
Yeah, you can find all that stuff. And loveoftheprocess.com is our big website, but come to my Instagram at Mike Pecci. I am peddling off my stuff like a used car salesman at my Instagram page all
But
the
you
time.
respond to DMs. I mean, that's how I got you on the podcast. So if
Yeah,
you do reach out, people, he will respond. He might not agree with your movie choices, but he'll respond to you.
for sure, for sure. And if you give me negative reviews, I'll post them.
That I actually love. I love when you do that. I really, I think it's brilliant. It's so funny.
I have so much fun with that. It's kind of my favorite thing. I mean, when someone sends me a negative review, I always laugh about it because it's like, look, I've made the movie.
Mm,
I've sat with the film for 1,000+ hours. I've
mm-hmm.
watched it so many times. I know everything that's wrong with the movie. I know. And so, and I'm good with it. As soon as I put it out, I came to a point where I went, eh, this isn't perfect, but it's good. And I put it out. So when someone writes me a negative review as if they're shining a light on something that I don't know, I laugh at it and I go, okay, cool, man. And then I love posting
Yeah.
rude people stuff because I just don't, I don't understand how people can be so rude. It's like if I invited you over to my house to have a meal and I
Mm-hmm.
cooked you a meal and I handed you a plate of food and you took one bite out of that plate of food and you went, this is crap, and you
Yeah.
threw it down on the ground, I would kick you out of my house. You'd be
Right.
shunned from my home.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing online. If you're
Yeah.
rude, then you're shunned from our home.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I really do. I like the reviews you get where it's just, it actually has nothing to do. It's like someone was in a bad mood and happened to like come across your film. Like for 12, I feel like that happened a lot for 12 kilometers. Like there
Yeah.
was a lot of like, too much gore. I'm not into it. It's like, then it's not for you. Don't watch it.
I had these two guys because we went viral with that. What's interesting is that that original idea, which was like send me your three favorite horror movies, and if I agree with you, I'll send you a link.
Mm-hmm.
I said that on the podcast as a it was kind of me being a jerk.
Mm.
And I was on the show because the truth of it is 12 kilometers is a proof of concept movie. So it's a 30-minute proof of concept movie that I
Mm.
made specifically for producers in Hollywood. So I made the film. I went out. I ended up in Ridley Scott's offices, and they loved the movie, and they're
Mm-hmm.
producing the film at some point. But
Amazing.
it was never really for the public. And
Right.
so I would talk about the film on the podcast all the time because we had made it. And I had a bunch of fans going, hey, how can we see this movie? You ever going to release this movie? And jokingly on the show, I went, I don't know, send me your three favorite horror movies. And if I agree with you, I'll send you a link. That went viral. That went
Right.
viral 3 times in the US. That went viral in Turkey and India. I have hundreds and thousands of DMs that I'm still trying to answer and respond to
Oh
from
no, you
folks.
guys, get it in quick. Like DM him
Yeah,
quick so you're at the top.
yeah, yeah, you have to now because Instagram sort of hit a point where it goes, oh, you have too many. And so like it threw away half of them. Instagram is real shady with that. So it's like,
Whoa, meta.
yeah.
Horrible.
So if you are someone that's waiting, send
Keep
me a new
waiting.
one. Send me a new one.
Send a new one.
Because then it'll show up higher on the feed and then you'll potentially get a link to see the movie.
There you go. I got lucky. I got really lucky.
You did. You
Thank you
lucked out.
so much for coming on Lox of Laughs.
Thank you for having me.
This
Appreciate
is
it.
great. Okay, I can't wait to chat with you after your next movie. I mean, I hope you come back.
I'll come back. I had fun.
We'll talk more about horror.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
That was so great.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you.
That was cool.
That was awesome.